Did you know that you did not need to hit your head in order to sustain a traumatic brain injury? I want to talk today about the forces that can cause a TBI, even if there's no head strike involved. I'm Bob Byrne. I'm an attorney who handles a lot of TBI claims, and I'm going to talk today about Coup Contrecoup injuries. So let's jump right in. So this is our trusty brain and skull model you can see here. And this has the handy top of the skull that you can lift right off. And you have a brain here that is heavy and kind of consistent with the actual weight and feel of a brain. And it's kind of rubbery. It's kind of gelatinous. The bottom of the skull has what are called these bony ridges in it. And the top of the skull, of course, just like the bottom, it's a bone, and so it's very hard. So inside the skull, we have what's called cerebrospinal fluid, and that's kind of this fluid that forms a little bit of a bath that the brain can kind of float in. And the brain just fits in there, and there's space between the brain and the skull. You can think of the brain as this gelatinous kind of organ that is floating in water. And that's all happening inside of the skull. So a lot of times when somebody sustains trauma, they're going to experience different types of forces on their brain and on their skull. One of the types of forces is an acceleration deceleration force. It's almost like the whiplash effect where a head goes forward, snaps forward, and snaps back. And that could happen, of course, in a car or truck crash, can happen in some sports, can happen in falls. So when these forces snap forward and snap back, there's what's called a coup. And a coup is when the brain slams into the front of the skull, and you can see that impact there. And then when it comes back, there's what's called a contrecoup. So these French terms, which means hitting the front, hitting the back. It could be side to side. It could be back to front. But when you have the acceleration and then the sudden deceleration. And what this does is it essentially bruises the brain, because remember, the brain's floating in all of that fluid, and the brain slams into the front of the skull, and then it slams into the back, or perhaps side to side, or at different angles, if you will, inside of the skull. These forces can operate without the head ever striking an object. Just because someone doesn't hit their head in a crash and doesn't have bruising or a contusion of some sort, doesn't mean that they do not have a mild traumatic brain injury or even a more moderate traumatic brain injury as a result of a coup contrecoup injury. So let's take a quick look at what this looks like in practice that I've seen in my law practice. So what's important to understand is that the front of the brain here has the frontal lobe, and this is kind of the executive center of the brain, and it controls emotions, your cognitive thinking, and a lot of self-control type functions of your brain. At the very back of the brain, back here, you have the occipital lobes. And with the occipital lobes, those can control vision, and they can impact your different visual functions. So sometimes what we'll see with a coup contrecoup injury is that somebody's going to have symptoms that are consistent with a lack of impulse control, bad judgment. So these frontal lobe type functions. But then at the same time, they're going to have vision issues. And so that shows that the brain slammed into the front of the skull. There was an injury there, and then it rebounded, slammed into the back. You have a frontal lobe injury, which is problems with the executive functioning, but also the occipital lobe injuries, which could have problems with vision. And that's not to say that those are the only issues that can happen. There could also be, of course, associated problems like headaches, nausea, light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, a lot of different things. But usually when you see those things together and there was a pretty violent crash where there was the acceleration and the deceleration, you can tell and you can see some telltale signs of a coup contrecoup injury. Now, it's important to understand with a TBI that has, say, the mechanism of injury of a coup contrecoup, that somebody may go to the emergency room. The emergency room physicians may not diagnose a concussion or a traumatic brain injury. They may do a head CT scan, you may have a head MRI, and both of those could come back and not show any type of trauma. And the reason why is because trauma can happen on a microscopic level, and CT scans and MRIs are not advanced enough to see things on a microscopic level. They can kind of do more of a zoom out, but they can't really see things on that microscopic of a level. And so there are ways that you can see it perhaps over time, but that just goes to show you how this can be a very misunderstood injury, how a lot of people suffer through brain injuries. They don't even realize that they have them because they haven't been diagnosed. They didn't strike their head. And then when they have imaging, it doesn't show a problem. And so they kind of suffer silently without knowing exactly what's going on. So it's important, if you are in a traumatic crash, which I see a lot of times, especially with truck crashes, get checked out, especially if you're having symptoms that are consistent with a traumatic brain injury. So thanks so much for watching this video. We both appreciate it. Sorry, I couldn't resist. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. Please consider liking this video and stay tuned for more. Thanks.